A very good morning, distinguished guests, speakers, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Silvia and I have the pleasure of being your MC today. On behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies, ISAS, the Consortium of South Asian think tanks, COSATT, and the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, KAS, I welcome you to this joint workshop on BIMSTEC at 20, Priorities and Prospects. To start the proceeding, I would like to invite Dr. Amitendu Palit, Senior Research Fellow and Research Lead, Trade and Economics, ISAS and US, to deliver the welcome remarks. Dr. Palit, please.
Many thanks, Sylvia. And on behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies, ladies, gentlemen, friends, colleagues, I take great pleasure in welcoming you all to this workshop on BIMSTEC at 20. It's the first occasion that ISAS is organizing a full-fledged, intensive academic and policy workshop on the subject of BIMSTEC. So in a sense, that itself might be taken as a signal of the fact that BIMSTEC has arrived. It has arrived because this is taking place in a country like Singapore. Singapore is not a member of BIMSTEC, for those of you who are aware of BIMSTEC's compositions. But nonetheless, Singapore is taking an active interest in the growth of BIMSTEC. And as the Institute of South Asian Studies, we are taking a very active interest in BIMSTEC because we have a unique character to us. We are based in Southeast Asia, and we follow the developments on South Asia, particularly the integration and linkages that South Asia has in the fields of economics, politics, and geostrategy with the rest of the region. So to that extent, BIMSTEC, which is one of the rare examples of a grouping comprising countries from both South Asia and Southeast Asia, is a very interesting process and example for us to study. And we do hope that we will be able to maintain the momentum in the years to come, because we are quite sure that BIMSTEC will prosper and proceed. There will obviously be challenges on the way, but we would like to take this forward as a distinct research initiative on our part. Today's workshop, as you would have noted, is essentially divided into two components. The first will have specific addresses, and among those who will be delivering the addresses today, I am particularly happy to welcome Ambassador Shahidul Islam, Secretary General of BIMSTEC. Ambassador, thank you very much for taking your time off. And he comes from the back of a very active schedule on BIMSTEC, because the 4th summit of the BIMSTEC concluded late last month. And the various declarations that have come out of the BIMSTEC, including exciting declarations like connection of energy grids across the member countries, is being discussed a lot. So we would look forward to listening from Ambassador Islam about the main issues that were discussed in the summit, the declaration, and the way forward. Apart from Ambassador Shahidul Islam, I am again very happy to welcome Ambassador Yong, who will deliver the second keynote address today. For those in Singapore, those of us who have been here, Ambassador Yong is a very well-known name. He's now the Executive Deputy Chairman of the Rajaratnam School of International Studies at the Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. So in a sense, I'll probably not be wrong if I say that Ambassador is certainly the best to deliver a Singapore perspective on BIMSTEC, and that's what I'm sure he will. So thank you, Ambassador, for gracing the occasion as you have done with us on so many times. We are grateful to you. I would also take this opportunity to very warmly welcome the country perspective and experts in the workshop who have come from almost all BIMSTEC member countries. They include Ambassador Biren Nanda from India, Mr. Kamal Thapa, Major General A.K.M. Abdul Rahman, Mr. Asanga from Sri Lanka, Dr. Satapon from Thailand, Professor Nunu from Myanmar, Faiz Shovan, Bangladesh, and Major General A.N. Muniruzzaman. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, so much for making your space within your preoccupied schedules for taking the trouble of traveling to Singapore at relatively short notice. I take this opportunity to involve the High Commissioner of Bangladesh as well on this occasion. And finally, I would like to express on behalf of ISAS our sincere thanks to two of our main partners today. The first is the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, represented by Mr. Christian Echle on my left, and then the COSATT, which has been doing very active work in the region in terms of think tank policy coordination, as well as bringing to the large number of research issues and important priority agendas, and led very effectively by Mr. Nishchal Pandey. So Nishchal, Christian, thank you both. And I am very sure this is the beginning of a meaningful partnership, and we in ISAS give a lot of importance to cultivation of partnerships, and we have a rather good record in doing so, in working with a large number of partners across the world. And I'm very optimistic that down the line, BIMSTEC research will flourish into an active area of research, and where from Singapore will be able to play a prominent role in the research that shapes with able partnership with KAS and COSATT and the rest of the institutes that have gathered here. With that, I think I will finish my quota of the speaking slot for the morning, and I'll request Dr. Nishchal Pandey, the Director, Center for South Asian Studies, Kathmandu, and convener, the Consortium of South Asian Think Tanks, COSATT in short, to deliver his remarks. Nishchal?
Thank you, Dr. Palit. His Excellency, the Secretary General of BIMSTEC, former Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Nepal, His Excellency, the High Commissioner of Bangladesh to Singapore, Ambassador Yong, my friend Mr. Christian Echle, friends from the COSATT network. I see a lot of old friends in the audience, Professor Basroor, Ambassador Iftikhar Chaudhary, ladies and gentlemen. So on behalf of the Consortium of South Asian Think Tanks, COSATT, let me warmly welcome each one of you for traveling long distances to attend this joint workshop on BIMSTEC, organized by the COSATT in cooperation with the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung and Institute of South Asian Studies. I'd like to thank friends at the ISAS, Mr. Harnik Singh in particular, and his team for conceptualizing the workshop and hosting us here today. I'd like to record my sincere appreciation to Mr. Christian Echle, to my friend Megha, and the KAS team also for their unflinching commitment to South Asia and to the various initiatives of the region and our regional undertakings, which has enabled us to come together as a grouping. Some of you may be aware that COSATT is a network of some of the prominent think tanks of South Asia, and each year we select themes of importance to the region and come together in one or the other capital of South Asia to deliberate and discuss on the ways forward. We also bring about publications that are disseminated very widely around the world. Increasingly, we have been trying to reach out to other regions as well, especially in Europe and Southeast Asia, in order to find synergies of common issues. Just very recently, Nepal hosted, and we had the honor to host the 4th BIMSTEC Summit in Kathmandu. And a number of initiatives have been taken to make this organization action-oriented. We are privileged here with us to have His Excellency the Secretary General of BIMSTEC, and senior experts from across the BIMSTEC region will give their views through the course of the day. But in particular, I would like to flag off a few important issues that may be of interest to you during the course of the discussions. Number one, BIMSTEC is being re-energized and reinvigorated at a time of Brexit, the Trump administration's increasing intensity of clamping down tariffs. How is that going to impact our region, which is now focusing on connectivity, on free trade, and so forth? Number two, how do we benefit as a region from outreach to Southeast Asia, in particular to Myanmar and Thailand? All of us bilaterally have had good relations with Southeast Asian countries, but as a region, how do we forge consensus on how to have better ties with Southeast Asian countries and what to benefit from our linkages with Thailand and Myanmar. Number 3, BIMSTEC is an organization currently without a charter. What would you like to have in the charter? It is going to be discussed gradually at the level of the governments, but from the track 2, from the civil society, is this a prime need or not? Number 4, BIMSTEC Development Fund and BIMSTEC Secretariat, we would all like to have it more powerful so that it can initiate projects by itself. Are there any suggestions in this regard? Number 5, role of think tanks, universities, research institutions. How do we forge contact among ourselves, among the think tanks of this region, and build linkages therein? And how to ensure regular summits of BIMSTEC itself? Because as we see in the last 20 years, we have just had 4 summits. How do we ensure regular meetings, not only at the summit level, but also at the level of the ministers? As we speak here today, SAARC foreign ministers are meeting in New York at the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. And we'd also like to hear your views on how to take lessons from what we have done as a region as regards to SAARC. The landlocked mountainous countries of Bhutan and Nepal suffer particularly from poor infrastructure and accessibility as a result of difficult topography. They depend on road transport for regional and international trade, and we are confronted with several bottlenecks which increase trade costs. A World Bank study recently has shown that Bhutan and Nepal face much higher transportation costs and require more time and paperwork for exports and imports. So to reap benefits of cooperation under BIMSTEC, these 2 landlocked countries need to be well connected to the regional economies and gain access to the Bay of Bengal. Plus, we also need inland waterways offer a potential pathway for this. Water transportation is environmentally advantageous and cost-effective compared to other forms of transportation, particularly for bulk commodities. All rivers originating in or flowing through Nepal and Bhutan merge with the Ganges and the Brahmaputra in India to ultimately reach the Bay of Bengal through Bangladesh. Another issue that I would like to point is that as the post-World War II vision of collective security, prosperity, and dignity at the global level through the United Nations seemed far-fetched, scholars came up with the idea of manageable regional level cooperation and now even sub-regional cooperation among countries with similar needs and aspirations as the next best thing. The BIMSTEC summit took place against this backdrop, but in an increasingly global order which is in disarray. Intellectual discourses raging on the rise of illiberal internationalism and the global economic situation marked by US-China trade tensions escalating into a virtual trade war. So BIMSTEC must identify few priority areas like these and one, regional electricity grid connectivity, and work on them properly to promote regional integration. Otherwise, it might end up making a lot of commitments but delivering very little. We at the COSATT network also do have plans to bring about a publication out of this workshop. We feel that this will be a contribution to the BIMSTEC exercise in itself. So let me once again thank each one of you for kindly attending this event here. I'd like to thank once again the Institute of South Asian Studies for collaborating with us to make this workshop successful. I'm sure, like myself, all of you are going to enjoy this event today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pandey. I would like now to invite Mr. Christian Echle, Director, Regional Program Political Dialogue Asia, KAS, Singapore, to deliver his opening remarks. Mr. Echle, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. His Excellency, Secretary General of BIMSTEC, Ambassador Islam, Ambassador Yong, Dr. Palit, dear Dr. Pandey, friends from the COSATT network, distinguished participants of this workshops, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm very pleased to be here this morning for this quite timely workshop on BIMSTEC at 20 Priorities and Prospects, organized jointly by the Institute of South Asian Studies, COSATT, and the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. We at the Foundation feel privileged to have joined hands to make this assembly of expert minds of the 2 regions to come here to Singapore. I understand that the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation is an organization of 7 countries of South and Southeast Asia with importance given to themes such as commerce, investment, technology, tourism, and human resource development. In an era where the future of multilateralism is being questioned and we are seeing a rise of protectionism, the recent BIMSTEC summit clearly shows the benefits of multilateral cooperation. The success of the recent summit clearly reiterates the fact that those multilateral agreements can be beneficial for all cooperating countries in developing their economies, promoting development, and supporting cross-border infrastructure projects, amongst others. I'm not here to promote a naive view on multilateralism. Even coming from the European Union, I think we know all about the challenges that we are facing right now. Brexit has been mentioned. And I think in regions like South Asia, where even the neighborhood relations sometimes are not as great, it is really a challenge to work together on a regional level. But we still believe, and do believe firmly, as Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, as coming from the European Union, that multilateralism is the only way forward. We are facing a myriad of challenges, and they need a collaborative response. That's where multilateralism comes in. Multilateralism in the most effective mode of international cooperation to address global issues, reach normative agendas, and contribute to the search of common and sustainable and ambitious solutions to today's challenges. To come together and collaborate might be difficult, but it's always worth it. I would like to quote the EU motto, which stands as unity in diversity. Asia is known for its diversity. Opinion and cultures can achieve much collectively. Together, the two regions can support the development of stronger transportation systems, collective action against climate change, agricultural best practices, and also contribute towards scientific development. The Konrad Adenauer Stiftung has been a broad supporter of the multilateral efforts in the region. Our recent publication, Multilateralism in a New World Order, and projects like the Consortium of South Asian think tanks are examples of our endeavors to support the integration of the regions. Since its inception 10 years ago, COSATT has always looked to integrate South Asia and also to improve its linkage to Southeast Asia. We hope that with this conference today, we can not only see the role of BIMSTEC in the next 20 years, but also look at how it can integrate two regions which are bound by geography and linked by history. We at the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung are happy that the COSATT network with some of the prominent think tanks of South Asia is collaborating with ISAS here at the National University of Singapore, as we did last year already. This year, we also have experts from Southeast Asian countries in this workshop, which makes it easy to draw lessons from political, economic, and institutional reform in other countries. I hope that we can benefit or we can contribute today to help BIMSTEC to reach its full potential, to be a vibrant and result-oriented organization. And I would like to see more meaningful cooperation in the years to come. Let me thank you both, co-organizers, ISAS and COSATT, for the wonderful preparation. I'm looking very much forward to the workshop today, and I wish us all a fruitful exchange. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Echle. It is now my pleasure to invite Ambassador Shahidul Islam, Secretary General, BIMSTEC, to deliver the keynote address. Ambassador Islam, please.
Ambassador Keng Yong, Executive Deputy Chairman, RSIS, Dr. Amitendu Palit, Senior Research Fellow, Institute of South Asian Studies, National University of Singapore, Dr. Nishchal Pandey, Convenor Consortium of South Asian think tanks, Mr. Christian Echle, Director Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, Singapore, His Excellency Mr. Mustafizur Rahman, High Commissioner of Bangladesh to Singapore, scholars from BIMSTEC member states, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm truly honored to speak at the workshop on BIMSTEC at 20, Priorities and Prospects, jointly organized by the Institute of South Asian Studies of the National University of Singapore. Consortium of South Asian think tanks, and Konrad, Adenauer, Stiftung. This workshop, which is devoted to BIMSTEC, is an indication of the growing global interest in BIMSTEC, an organization that brings together 7 member states from South and Southeast Asia, namely Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Myanmar, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Thailand. The event has assumed additional importance as it is taking place soon after the holding of the 4th BIMSTEC Summit in Kathmandu, Nepal, from 30 to 31st August 2018. BIMSTEC lacks visibility, and I'm hoping that this particular workshop will provide some more visibility to BIMSTEC. Another reason that makes me very happy to attend today's event at ISAS is that Dr. Iftikhar Ahmed Chowdhury, a highly respected Bangladeshi diplomat, and my former boss, is associated with this prestigious institution, and I'm so very happy to meet him here. Ladies and gentlemen, we are meeting at a time when BIMSTEC has gained considerable maturity as a regional organization. The Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multisectoral, Technical and Economic Cooperation, or BIMSTEC, was established through the adoption of Bangkok Declaration in 1997. As stipulated in the Bangkok Declaration, the organization was created with the desire to establish a firm foundation for common action to promote sub-regional cooperation in the areas of trade, investment, technological exchange, and other interrelated areas in a spirit of equality and partnership, and thereby contribute towards peace, progress, and prosperity in their common region. The forum was established at a time when various tracks of regional cooperation initiatives, most notably through ASEAN and SAARC, were already active in the region. It made sense, therefore, that one of the founding principles of BIMSTEC was to constitute an additionality to, and not to be a substitute for, bilateral, regional, or multilateral cooperation involving member states. Before I talk about BIMSTEC's priorities and prospects, it would perhaps be useful to briefly examine BIMSTEC's achievement or lack of it during the past 20 years. Let us acknowledge that in spite of BIMSTEC's lack of visibility, the last 20 years have not gone in vain. During the last 20 years, the membership of BIMSTEC increased from 4 to 7 countries surrounding the Bay of Bengal region. During the last 20 years, the organization identified 14 areas of cooperation and broadened the scope of cooperation from purely technical and economic fields to include such areas as counterterrorism and transnational crime. During the same time, the grouping, which was primarily meant to pursue development project-based sub-regional cooperation, transformed into a regional organization in its own right and began to lay down legal framework and institution building. In 2014, BIMSTEC established its permanent secretariat in Dhaka, Bangladesh, which has significantly improved the organization's capacity to follow up and monitor BIMSTEC leaders' directives and also record keeping. 4 specialized centers, namely BIMSTEC Center for Weather and Climate in India, BIMSTEC Cultural Industries Observatory in Bhutan, BIMSTEC Energy Center in India, and BIMSTEC Technology Transfer Facility in Sri Lanka are at various stages of operationalization. A notable achievement of BIMSTEC in its norm-setting role was the signing of framework agreement on BIMSTEC Free Trade Area in 2004. Another important legal instrument namely BIMSTEC Convention on International Terrorism, Transnational Organized Crime, and Illicit Drug Trafficking, signed in 2009, has received ratification of great majority of the member states. The BIMSTEC process received fresh impetus at the BIMSTEC Leaders Retreat held in Goa, India in 2016, when the leaders reiterated their strong political commitment to make the organization stronger, more effective, and result-oriented. Since then, member states are moving faster to conclude new agreements to enhance trade and connectivity, including agreement on cooperation and mutual assistance in customs matters, BIMSTEC Motor Vehicle Agreement, and BIMSTEC Coastal Shipping Agreement. Most member states have expressed their readiness to sign BIMSTEC Convention on Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters. During the 4th BIMSTEC Summit held last month in Nepal, member states have signed the Memorandum of Understanding on the establishment of BIMSTEC grid interconnection to facilitate electricity trade in the region. Another important role that is being played by BIMSTEC is that the organization has developed into a useful platform to facilitate regular exchanges among the policymakers and senior officials of member states, thereby narrowing down differences and creating common grounds for cooperation. During the last 20 years, our heads of states and governments met 5 times, our foreign ministers met 16 times, our foreign secretaries met 19 times, and our national security chiefs met twice in the span of last 2 years. This would indicate that BIMSTEC core meetings have attained a high degree of regularity. The 4th BIMSTEC Summit has further emphasized holding regular meetings at various levels of BIMSTEC mechanism and decided to hold meetings of BIMSTEC home ministers to strengthen cooperation to combat terrorism and organized crime. Many scholars have suggested that one of the reasons for which BIMSTEC could not achieve its full potential is that the organization has chosen to deal with too many issues with limited resources. Currently, the organization has 14 sectors of cooperation that includes trade and investment, transport and communications, technology, energy, tourism, fisheries, agriculture, disaster management, culture, people-to-people contact, counter-terrorism and transnational crime, poverty alleviation, public health, and climate change. The 4th BIMSTEC Summit agreed to review and rationalize the existing sectors of cooperation to make the organization more focused and result-oriented. Thailand has proposed to bring down the numbers of sectors to 5: connectivity, trade and investment, people-to-people contact, counter-terrorism, transnational crime, and science and technology. While it is not yet decided as to how many sectors will be there eventually, connectivity and trade and investment will continue to remain at the heart of BIMSTEC activities towards building a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable Bay of Bengal region. The leaders at the 4th BIMSTEC Summit reiterated the importance of trade and investment as one of the major contributing factors for fostering economic and social developments in the region. The leaders renewed their commitment to an early conclusion of BIMSTEC Free Trade Area negotiations and directed the BIMSTEC Trade and Economic Ministerial Meeting and its subsidiary bodies, including the Trade Negotiating Committee, to expedite finalization of all related agreements of the BIMSTEC FTA as early as possible. The leaders also agreed to revitalize the activities of BIMSTEC Business Forum and BIMSTEC Economic Forum to further strengthen government-private sector cooperation for the promotion of trade and investment. The leaders directed the expert group on BIMSTEC visa matters to continue negotiation for finalization of the modalities for the BIMSTEC visa facilitation, including BIMSTEC business visa scheme. This is an acknowledgement by the leaders that easier, unhindered movement of businessmen and investors is vital for promoting trade and investment in this region. The BIMSTEC Trade Negotiating Committee, created in 2004, has since held 20 rounds of negotiations. The last one held in Khon Kaen, Thailand, in September 2015. Fresh initiatives are being taken by member states, led by Bangladesh, which is the lead country for trade and investment, to resume FTA negotiations. I am optimistic that we'll be able to sign the agreement on trade in goods and customs cooperation agreement within 2019. Side by side, other trade facilitation agreements are also being negotiated to remove non-tariff barriers to trade. There is a general consensus among the member states that a well-established transport network is a prerequisite for reaping the benefits of a free trade area, including the promotion of trade and investment, as well as other areas of cooperation such as tourism, people-to-people contact, and cultural exchange. Most member states have taken initiatives towards implementation of projects identified by the ADB-assisted BIMSTEC Transport Infrastructure and Logistics Studies of 2014 in order to address the missing links to establish greater physical and economic connectivity between South and Southeast Asia. BIMSTEC is currently developing the BIMSTEC Transport Connectivity Master Plan with a vision to promote seamless connectivity between and across BIMSTEC countries through the use of different transport modes to achieve enhanced transport and trade linkages for faster and more inclusive growth. We have already made significant progress, and we intend to finalize the master plan in this calendar year. The scope of the master plan includes both hard and soft infrastructure, including physical roads, railways, ports, inland waterways, and airport. The soft infrastructure includes capacity building, transport access agreements, and the harmonization of rules, regulations, policies, and measures related to transport between and among member states, with a view to facilitating the cross-border movement of goods and services in support of the BIMSTEC free trade area. The leaders during the 4th BIMSTEC Summit reiterated their resolve to establish seamless multimodal transport linkages and smooth, synchronized, and simplified transit facilities through the development, expansion, and modernization of highways, railways, waterways, sea routes, and airways in the region. The Prime Minister of India, Honorable Narendra Modi, during his speech in the 4th BIMSTEC Summit, stated, and I quote, "I believe that the biggest opportunity is connectivity, trade connectivity, economic connectivity, transport connectivity, digital connectivity, and people-to-people connectivity," unquote. The summit directed respective authorities to speed up their efforts to conclude the BIMSTEC Coastal Shipping Agreement and the BIMSTEC Motor Vehicle Agreement as early as possible. The leaders agreed that the BIMSTEC Transport Connectivity Master Plan would serve as a strategic document that would guide actions and promote synergy among various connectivity frameworks. It is hoped that time-bound implementation of projects identified in the master plan with institutional framework provided by the BIMSTEC Coastal Shipping Agreement and BIMSTEC Motor Vehicle Agreement will spearhead the regional integration that BIMSTEC envisages. The other areas of cooperation that will continue to receive attention include science and technology, energy cooperation, environment and disaster management, counter-terrorism and transnational crime, and people-to-people contact. The 4th BIMSTEC Summit reiterated BIMSTEC's commitment to the eradication of poverty in the Bay of Bengal region by 2030, in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and called for gearing up efforts of all sectors to contribute to the overarching goal of poverty alleviation. Until recently, BIMSTEC process was marked by a high degree of informality, where unwritten practices and norms were relied upon in conducting business, and meetings were held according to convenience rather than exigencies of issues. The fourth BIMSTEC summit has taken a number of decisions to bring clarity and predictability in the BIMSTEC process. The leaders agreed to adopt a BIMSTEC charter which will be built on the 1997 Bangkok Declaration and will define a long-term vision and priorities for cooperation, clearly delineating roles and responsibilities of different layers of institutional structure and decision-making processes. The BIMSTEC Charter will be adopted in the 5th summit to be held in Sri Lanka, the present chair of BIMSTEC. The leaders also agreed to have rules of procedure for the BIMSTEC mechanisms. Another important institutional mechanism considered by the leaders is to establish a BIMSTEC development fund. The leaders directed their relevant ministries to explore the possibility of establishing a BIMSTEC development fund, which will be utilized for research and planning of BIMSTEC and financing of projects, programs, and other activities of BIMSTEC centers and entities. The leaders also decided to enhance the institutional capacity of BIMSTEC Secretariat through increased financial and human resources in order to enable it to coordinate, monitor, and facilitate implementation of BIMSTEC activities. As a first step, the number of directors at the Secretariat will be raised to 7 from the existing 3, to be filled by 1 director from each member state. They also emphasized the need to accelerate progress in the core areas of cooperation and to review, restructure, and rationalize the existing areas of BIMSTEC cooperation and streamline the operational modalities for activities, implementation of programs, and projects under BIMSTEC for bringing out tangible results. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the norm-setting role will continue to dominate the activities of BIMSTEC for some time. While cooperation in combating terrorism and transnational crime, including drug trafficking and human trafficking, will need utmost attention of the member states, it will also be important to ensure seamless movement of goods, services, capital, and human persons, including businessmen, investors, scholars, and tourists across the region. The conclusion of BIMSTEC FTA and ratification of counterterrorism and transnational crime-related conventions will therefore be a priority in the coming days. While it is only natural that BIMSTEC will increasingly consolidate its identity as a community of Bay of Bengal nations, it will also continue to leverage on its unique position of bridging South and Southeast Asia and remain open to enter into meaningful collaboration with entities having similar aims and objectives. As per mandate given by the 4th BIMSTEC Summit, the Secretariat is exploring possibilities of establishing meaningful collaboration with ADB and ESCAP to advance project-based development cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, BIMSTEC has come of age and is poised to play a greater and more visible role in promoting peace, prosperity, and sustainable development in the Bay of Bengal region. With renewed political commitment on the part of the member states and necessary institutional structure in place, the time for BIMSTEC has come. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Islam. I would like now to invite Ambassador Yong, Executive Deputy Chairman, Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, to deliver his special address. Ambassador Ong, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First of all, let me thank the organizers for this invitation to speak to all of you on this subject of BIMSTEC cooperation, which is actually not something I have been following closely due to my other preoccupations. So I am honored with this invitation. I will try my best to make some sense of what I see to be happening in the BIMSTEC area. And I share my views from the standpoint of a former Secretary General of ASEAN, who actually had a rather long conversation over 2 different occasions with former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra of Thailand. He floated this idea of having BIMSTEC around the middle of 2003, and I was Secretary General of ASEAN at that time, from January 2003 to January 2008. And I don't know why he would talk to me about his proposal for BIMSTEC, but he discussed it during the coffee break when we had our ASEAN summit in 2003. And later, when I saw him again in 2004, he continued this articulation of what he sees to be a good idea, having BIMSTEC. So, when ISAS invited me to this particular workshop, I tried to recover from my old notes what I jotted down as Thaksin's idea of BIMSTEC. Those of you who are familiar with me, I used to jot down little notes here and there, and my office staff had a hard time trying to piece together all these scraps of paper, because sometimes I write on even biscuit wrapper. Whatever good idea that I can hear from the speakers or from the participants at any meetings. So, from that angle, I will try to put some sense into what we are talking today. Purely, really, just to share with you something which I have not really looked at closely, but since this invitation come, I thought I should dig up all the old things and contribute to the discussion. Basically, Thaksin was very devoted to this idea of BIMSTEC for several reasons, which I pieced together from all the conversation and the notes that I took down. Conversation with him and the notes that he took down. The notes that I took down. Originally, he said BIMSTEC stands for Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Sri Lanka Economic Cooperation. Let me repeat that. Stand for Bangladesh, India, Myanmar,
Sri Lanka and Thailand.
Sri Lanka, Thailand Economic Cooperation. Later, in 2004, he actually said, we changed it to suit one very important feedback he got from talking to the other leaders in these countries that he targeted. He said that if you put it like that, BIMSTEC stands for Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and Thailand, nobody else will join. Yeah? And we want to have more members eventually. So it came out to become what is this called today? Bay of Bengal, whatever, initiative for multi-sectorial technical and economic cooperation. Okay, so that was about the name. Then he argued with me about the usefulness of having BIMSTEC to link up South Asia and Southeast Asia. I thought that the economic development in this region was quite slow, and it would take some time. And as Secretary General of ASEAN, I mentioned that perhaps we should focus on our own region. But he was very keen, and he mentioned quite a few things which I can now classify as the following. He talked about the geography. He was very adamant that there is the connection. Nowadays we call it connectivity. He said there is connection between Myanmar with Bangladesh into South Asia. Then he talked about the seas and the oceans. And more importantly, he mentioned about the rivers. Along the way, he talked about inland waterways and all that. So he reminded us that the Bay of Bengal is really an important traditional trade route between the Indian empires of the past and the Southeast Asian empires. And he said that actually Islam and many other religions had come through Southeast Asia via the Bay of Bengal. And actually, I don't know whether it is really something quite coincidental, but he did mention that in the old days we have the Arakan state, the Muslim kingdom of Arakan. And if we don't start thinking about these issues of Muslim and non-Muslim, we will have problem later on. So if we can get everybody together, the population of this area will be more than 1.5 billion people. Even back in 2003, he said that. And it's a big market. But it is now relatively poor. If we do more to develop the economy and the marketplace, there will be business, and some of the more established country in terms of manufactured goods and services will be able to invest and do more and then grow the market. But he has also one other consideration, which was really about the architecture, what he called the architecture of the region. He said if we don't do anything about it, it will be dominated by China and India. And this is no good for all of us in ASEAN or in South Asia. And he said that the countries in the region, India and Thailand, his own country, should try to encourage some leadership and get more people into this idea of a economic cooperation framework for this Bay of Bengal region. If we don't do it, he said, well, other countries from outside the region will take over. So, roughly speaking, that was my conversation with former Prime Minister Thaksin. I don't know where he is today. I have no contact with him. I cannot ask him to confirm what I've just told you. I met him once in London, somewhere on Oxford Street. He was shopping. I was walking along, going to a meeting. Another time I saw him in Dubai, also at the airport. And that was it in the last 10 years or so. So hopefully, somehow, someday I will get all these things over to him and tell him that I have framed his idea into the concept of GOPAL, G-O-P-A-L. GOPAL, G stands for geography, O for the ocean, P for the population, the people, A for the architecture, and L for the leadership. Maybe he will agree, and then we can write a piece of paper on this, Amit, and ISA can publish it. Not in my name, but in his name, because all the idea came from him. So that's the background in my preparation for this discussion here at the workshop. What do we do now, going forward? You have just heard Ambassador Shahid talking about the outcome of the latest BIMSTEC summit in Kathmandu in Nepal. I think it's important that the summit take place. After all, you say BIMSTEC has been around for 20 years, but so far there have only been 4 summits. The first summit actually took place in Thailand in 2004. Yeah, more than 7 years after the idea of BIMSTEC was hatched by the leaders. Then the next summit took place in New Delhi about 5 years later. And then about 6 years later, we have the third summit in Myanmar. And now, just in this August, we have the 4th summit in Nepal. The Bay of Bengal is an important area. When we look at Indian Ocean, we have to look at Bay of Bengal first. We means ASEAN countries, because Indian Ocean is so big. So when we look at the Bay of Bengal, it has so many communities along the coast, so many diverse ethnic groups going into the interior. And actually, notwithstanding the many rivers and mountains, we can drive from Bangkok all the way to Dhaka and all the way to New Delhi. I know this because in 2004, we did the ASEAN-India car rally. It is physically possible, although at that time the rally really gave me a lot of heart attacks because the leaders were all waiting to meet some of these cars that are supposed to come all the way to Bangkok or to Singapore, but the arrival dates were delayed a few times because the physical roads were not up to standard and the bridges in some cases had collapsed due to the bad weather. So I think if you look at the Bay of Bengal, it is today a major shipping route. And actually, if you consider the more than 1.5 billion people, it is a huge market. And some development have taken place in Bangladesh in particular. The economy has moved ahead, and there are many more opportunities for foreign investors and also investors within our own region, ASEAN region, Southeast Asia, as well as South Asia. Not counting the Chinese, they are always ready to come in. If you just give them half the door open, they will have flooded the market. So it shows that this area has tremendous economic potential. Question is, how do we exploit these opportunities? From the ASEAN perspective, I wish to maybe make 3 points about how we can go forward regarding the prospects and priorities for the BIMSTEC countries. Number one really is that we have to look at the needs of the people in these countries of the BIMSTEC. I appreciate the need for a comprehensive summit declaration. In ASEAN, we have a summit every year, and honestly, it's a real pain for the whole body to talk about drafting a summit declaration. Every country in ASEAN, 10 of us, want to put in their favorite paragraph and project. But I think, although the scope has been narrowed down to a few that you have considered most important to go forward, it is still, in my opinion, too many. We heard the idea of narrowing down to 5. Maybe that's a good way to go. The latest summit declaration is the reference point for all of us in BIMSTEC and outside BIMSTEC. But we prioritize the work plan for the next few years before the next 5th summit in Colombo, Sri Lanka, to maybe the 5 areas that you have identified. It will be good because from the experience of ASEAN, we need to have some low-hanging fruits and to have some what we call quick wins. You have to win quickly. You keep talking about some of these idea of poverty alleviation, people-to-people exchanges, cultural activities. All these require money, and nobody is going to put in money unless they can see some benefit coming out from the market development and the trade and business progress. So I think low-hanging fruits and quick wins must be the main preoccupation of BIMSTEC countries. What are these? I cannot list any of the areas because I don't have enough knowledge of the actual condition on the ground, but it is for the BIMSTEC country to prioritize and to focus on the areas that you think would bring the quickest return or the quickest result, because people need to see result in order to support the idea of BIMSTEC and the statements of political leaders to open up and go and join each other in developing cooperation for this region. But from the ASEAN-India car rally experience, I had to tell you that I went to Guwahati, and then along the way we went to the Myanmar border, and I had to leave from there because I couldn't spend the 3 days waiting for the bridge to be fixed to get across. So looking at the kind of trouble we have driving on countryside roads and crossing borders, there is an urgent need for people to get across border easily, do some business, and when business is good, people will come, more people will come, and you can grow. And the population on the ground will say, yeah, this is the way. We have a thing called BIMSTEC. It allows us to travel more easily. Custom inspection is according to a set of rules which are available on the computer. And you cannot say the whim and fancy of the custom officer or the border guards. So this may be something that you need to think about. Yeah. The second point I want to mention is that buy-in from the local population is very important. We are still struggling with this in ASEAN because, take the example of Indonesia. We want to do ASEAN connectivity, but Indonesia with 17,000 islands require a lot of inter-island ferry services, inter-island shipping, and the local people don't see this happening. So they always laugh at our connectivity master plan and say, I can't even bring my high school going kids to the next island where there is a high school, because on my island there is no high school. And then you tell me about all this fancy master plan for connectivity, bringing ASEAN to the world. Hey, fix my local problem first. So I think this is important, the buy-in from the local population when they see some specific benefits for their respective local conditions or problems they have. In this respect, I think one buy-in that, or one easy win which you can think about is how do we quickly digitize the local economy. Seriously, you have good connection nowadays from handphone. You don't need landlines. You don't need big company to come and invest in telecom services. You just have one smart entrepreneur who will fix up a satellite dish using the technology from your satellite telephone, which the soldiers use when they are fighting each other on the battlefield. You can get connection. And once the connection is on, yeah, whatever is available in the cyberspace, you can get in. And you know what is needed in this area, what you can sell, how you can market your products, and how you can transfer people from one village to another to job elsewhere in the neighborhood or across another country. So digital transformation is quite critical. And as I say, in ASEAN, we also learned that digitalization, using the IT and computer, we reduce the tendencies of authorities in different parts of our ASEAN region to introduce their own law, their own regulation, their own what we call practices to get things done in the particular local area. So this idea of digitalization is not just a fashionable label that we have today, because everywhere we see smartphone or mobile phone telephony. Yeah, but I think this is a serious proposition which you can think about. I have nothing against the development of space cooperation, but what would be the ordinary man or woman thinking about space technology? He just wanted to know, or they just want to know whether I can have handphone connection and I can do business, or I know where my son and daughter are for their education and what have you. And I mentioned digital development because even in developed small city-state like Singapore, we are still struggling with the impact of digital technology, because many of our citizens are trained in jobs from a different era, 21st century today. The new job today, if you read the newspaper, is nothing of the kind that I am trained to do or how people of the older generation were brought up. So if we don't start thinking about this kind of basic educational skill upgrading, we will be further behind. The last point I want to make is really about the geopolitics of BIMSTEC region. I think the BIMSTEC area is, as former Prime Minister of Thailand Thaksin put it, geographically very, very strategic. Without passing the BIMSTEC area, people from China, people from certain part of India, or people from certain part of Southeast Asia cannot get into the Indian Ocean. And the Indian Ocean today, which covers Bay of Bengal, is still the most important trading sea lanes, sea routes between the western side of the world and the eastern side of the world. So the geopolitical considerations are very, very demanding, if I can say it this way. Yeah. And what we need to appreciate is that if we don't get our act together, yeah, those who are able to put together their geopolitical strategy will be there, and maybe too late for any one of us to do anything to counteract or challenge them. So the idea of more cooperation in commerce, in agriculture, in climate change mitigation and all that are important, but what is more critical is to underline your term here called the BIMSTEC centrality. We in ASEAN have this thing called ASEAN centrality, and people are still struggling. What does it mean? It simply means, as I always say, when ASEAN interests require us to hang together, we hang together. The centrality of the ASEAN concept, ASEAN cooperation, comes first. When there are complicated issues which we all got to stay together and push through. Beyond this, each of us pursue our national interests and do things for our national population. But if we are a member of a grouping like BIMSTEC, we have to remind ourselves what we need to do from time to time to highlight the interests of BIMSTEC as a group. In ASEAN, we are still struggling with that, but in some areas we have been doing quite all right. However, it requires constant discussion among the leaders to always bring ASEAN back to the center of ASEAN. ASEAN is able to have this convening power, bring external major powers together because we put aside our differences at a certain time to all sit together and deal with the big powers from the other side. So this is something that you probably need to constantly remind our officials and leaders as they go about strengthening BIMSTEC. The idea of Prime Minister of India to establish a center for BIMSTEC studies, or what he called the Bay of Bengal studies, may be a good one. Perhaps the Indian colleagues can persuade him to change it to BIMSTEC studies as a way to popularize this idea. I noticed that in recent days you have now joint military field training cooperation. This may be good for our counter-terrorism and counter-radicalization initiatives, but it might be something that will arouse certain undesired sentiments. For example, I noticed that two countries were not really participating in the joint military field training, namely Thailand and Myanmar. Nepal, yeah. Thailand and Nepal, yeah, because they are so close to the big guy across the border. So maybe they wisely decided to stay away. But they are also interested in knowing what other BIMSTEC guys are doing, so they send some quote-unquote observers. Yeah. So it shows that there is a pulling power of the concept of BIMSTEC. The question is, how do we exploit this advantage of BIMSTEC to the benefit of all the BIMSTEC countries? So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I think I should stop here since I've already been too long-winded. But I wish BIMSTEC well, and ASEAN countries, we have not focused on BIMSTEC in a substantial way, but I think in the coming months or years, more and more will be on the table of the ASEAN sectoral meetings, because we need to talk about Indian Ocean activities, we need to talk about environment, climate change mitigation, we need to talk about movement of people from South Asia into Southeast Asia and vice versa. So all this means that we have to take recognition of the entity called BIMSTEC, and the Secretariat is now in Dhaka, Bangladesh, so it will be a very convenient contact point to start talking to one another. ASEAN has all kind of connection with different groups around the world. We have dialogue with Mercosur country. You know, I had to travel 2 days to go to Montevideo in Uruguay for a 3-hour meeting, ASEAN and Mercosur. After 3 hours, I had to rush back, even though there were 2 days of tour program for me, because I had to go to another ASEAN meeting. Then I had to go to Fiji for the Pacific Island State meeting. And we traveled 2 days there. And if I don't leave Fiji after that particular meeting, there's no aeroplane to take me out for the next 3 days. So I am sure BIMSTEC, which is just next door, and you can actually sail in a boat to any of the countries along the Bay of Bengal coast. This will be quite exciting and interesting for our ASEAN external relations. So I look forward to witnessing some of these great prospects. Thank you very much for your